Passengers and Polish is the 13th episode of the 4th series, based on the story of the same name from the Railway series book, Gallant Old Engine. This is the second major role Duncan the Stubborn Engine has, and it was my first introduction to Duncan when I was a kid. But does it still hold up years later? Let's have a look. One day, a guard's daughter named Nancy is polishing Skarloey. He thinks she's just fussing over him unnecessarily and idly snoozes, dreaming of Rheneas and all the times they had shared together before he went away to be mended. Interrupting his dream, Nancy tells him that Rheneas is coming home soon. The news of Rheneas' return immediately changes his mind and he asks Nancy to polish him again, which she does. Duncan then appears and asks to be polished too, but Nancy does not have time because she has promised to help the refreshment lady to serve ices to the passengers. Envious, Duncan complains about Peter Sam getting a special funnel, Sir Handel getting special wheels and passengers getting refreshments while he does not even get polished. This is untrue, but Duncan, who enjoys complaining, has an increasingly sulky mood. That afternoon, Duncan's driver tells him that one of Skarloey's coaches is derailed and they will have to take workmen there right away. Duncan, however, is sulky about having to do extra work. Because the derailed coach is in the middle of Skarloey's train, Skarloey continued on with the two front coaches. Duncan brings workmen to get the derailed coach back on the rails and then takes the passengers in the rear coaches home. Duncan makes the journey very difficult, complaining that he gets no rest. So his driver, worried that he will keep the passengers waiting, decides to stop to build up steam. Duncan stubbornly refuses to try and build up steam and blames his driver for not caring enough about him. Soon, however, they start off again, but Duncan still grumpily remarks that he is overworked and will not stand it. Before they reach the last station, his driver attempts to encourage him by saying that he will get a rest and a drink at the station, but Duncan becomes extremely rude and comes to a complete stop on the viaduct. Since he refuses to budge, Skarloey is called on to pull him to the last station. The passengers are infuriated and tell everyone what a bad railway it is. That night, the Fat Controller scolds Duncan for his bad behaviour, reminding him that no passengers means no polish. But Duncan retorts under his breath that no polish means no passengers, making it clear that he still has a lot to learn. This episode was actually my introduction to Duncan, since I got to see it on Thomas and Stepney and other stories before Rock and Roll and other stories. So this was how I was introduced to Duncan, and this one still holds up to me because of how entertaining it is. You get to see Duncan's personality shine through once again. I'm also introduced to Nancy the guard's daughter, who likes to polish the steam engines on the Skarloey Railway from time to time. I find it a real shame that we never got to see her again after this episode, aside from cameos, because she made at least 2 appearances in the Railway series, so she could have had some more time to shine in the future of the series, especially during the Brenner era. Just imagine seeing her interact with the engines in CGI. That would have been cool. My favourite parts of the episode have always been Duncan's complaining and moaning about stuff that he feels is unfair to him.
It isn't fair, he complained. Peter Sam gets a special funnel, Sir Handel gets special wheels, passengers get ices, but I'm not even polished. All this extra work, grumbled Duncan. It wears an engine out. I get no rest, I get no rest, he muttered. You always think about the passengers and never about me. I'm overworked and I won't stand it. Keep your old station. I'm staying here. No passengers means no polish. No polish means no passengers, Duncan muttered to himself.
It's just so enjoyable hearing these things come out of Michelangelos' mouth, especially with the way he performs Duncan's voice. And the scene of Duncan stopping on the viaduct outside the station is just such a memorable moment. It's so iconic in fact that the Tadaclyn Railway would reenact it with the locomotive during the Audrey Extravaganza every year. It just shows how much people really love this moment from the TV series and the Railway series. The major difference from the TV adaptation to the book is the fact that Duncan actually takes the second train when he stops on the viaduct. In the original book, he brings the passengers from Skarloey's rear coaches home, then arrives back in time for his next train. And he ends up stopping on the viaduct deliberately when he has his own passengers rather than Skarloey's passengers. But I personally think the scene has a lot more impact when it's Skarloey's passengers instead of Duncan's own, because Duncan was tasked with taking the workmen to sort out the derailed coach and bringing the rest of Skarloey's passengers home. So it makes the scene more impactful and more selfish of Duncan if he does it to Skarloey's passengers rather than his own. Obviously it's bad whichever passengers he does it to, but I think it just adds more to his stubbornness and rudeness when he does it to Skarloey's passengers. This episode also marks the last time the passengers make remarks about a bad railway until the 18th series episode Duck and the Slip Coaches. And we once again get a good view of all the gorgeous sights of the Skarloey Railway. One I've come to appreciate the most is that old castle by the waters. It's just such a beautiful scene to me, with the rails going across the water, those mountains in the background, and that old castle. It's just such a wonderful sight and reminds me of all the old trips I used to take when I was little. Just seeing so many old castle towers and whatnot. Passengers and Polish was my introduction to Duncan, and I still love it to this day. It's a fun episode with fun interactions with Duncan and the other characters, and it's just an all-around enjoyable episode that I highly recommend for anyone that loves the TV series as well as Duncan. It's definitely among one of the most entertaining.